7 satisfyingly spooky supernatural tales. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notified. The basement. It was when I was around 8 and my mother, my sister and I moved into a new house in upstate New York. The man renting out the house, let's call him Logan, gave my mother a good deal because he was going to be moving to Portugal with his wife. Let's call her Claire. The house was yellow with white detailing and was one story with a basement. It was winter, so it was cold and we weren't in the best financial situation, so instead of touching the thermostat, we overdid it on blankets and extra layers. Those few months of the winter were almost always freezing. Snow fell every day at a rapid pace covering the town, but they gave me the best moments I had had with my family in a long time. Since it has been just the three of us, we all felt disconnected from one another. But the holiday cheer that we spread in the new house with our green and white tree, bright lights, and even one of those little prop Santa Claus figures for the lawn brought us together in a way that was better than the last. It had the potential of being the best end to the year, but unfortunately, usually when things start to go well for us, there is something ready to change our luck. About a week before Christmas, the stench began to flood up the house. Up until this point, none of us had gone down to the basement because my mum didn't remember where she put the key since moving day. We had no idea where the god-awful smell was coming from until we passed by the basement door a couple of times during the day. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a screwdriver to take the door handle off so we could go downstairs and investigate. When we reached the bottom stairs, the basement looked dusty, but it was still an ordinary basement. To put it in perspective, the basement was about 600 square feet with 7-foot ceilings. Looking around the area, there was nothing in sight. All three of us felt as if we were dying, breathing in the fumes consistently and being in the place where its smell was the strongest. So my mum and sister went back upstairs while I stayed in the basement, using my shirt as a makeshift gas mask. After searching for what seemed like hours, I was stumped. There was no traces of anything down there. So I gave up and headed back upstairs and went to bed for the night. That night I had a dream. A woman with long brown hair, the greenest eyes I've seen to this day, a button nose and the smile of an angel was above my bed on the ceiling, just staring at me and crying. She wore a black dress paired with a black veil. As she stared, she wept, just floating there until I finally felt her last tear hit my cheek. At that moment, she began to glide down to me, her somber expression changing to a malicious one. It wasn't sleep paralysis. I closed my eyes and prayed for her to go back to where she came from. When I opened my eyes, the woman was gone, and I could go back to sleep, with one eye open, of course. I woke up the next morning to the smell plaguing the house. Coming from the basement, all I could smell was death. My mum thought it was just a squirrel that had died in the wall, but this smell was too strong to be an animal. We all went back down to the basement and began our search again, this time ready with old shirts covering our faces to block out the odour. During our search, I found an old suitcase, which I assumed belonged to our landlord. I'm naturally nosy, so I opened it to find it filled with pictures. I searched through the pictures for a moment, only to see something that made my heart stop. In most of the pictures, I could see our landlord next to the lady I saw in my dream. Why would I be seeing this random woman in my dreams if I'd never seen her prior to now? I turned a picture of them together over, and sure enough, the caption written on the back was "Claire and Logan forever," with a little heart. I started to feel weirded out at the realization, but continued with the search for the source of the smell. It took about 35 minutes to trace the smell now that we weren't being bombarded by it. It was coming from the corner of our basement. The stench rose through a patch of cracked cement. As we had no way to get through it, we called and asked our landlord why there was a patch of cracked cement and the best way to get rid of the odour. Our landlord claimed that it was nothing and said we should just leave the basement alone. But the way the smell took over the house and seeped into every material it could find was unnatural. My mother decided to call animal control, and they arrived surprisingly fast. When the two men got downstairs, they looked at each other and walked right back upstairs. My mum was confused, but the two men went back to their van and did not come back inside until we heard the sirens of police arriving at our house. The men from animal control apologized to my mum profusely and began telling her why they called the police. Now, of course, my mother didn't tell me this then, but today she's told me the truth. The men from animal control could tell that the smell wasn't anything that they were qualified to deal with. Apparently, our landlord had been married multiple times, but they never seemed to last long due to his spouses having some kind of health issue, or so they believed. The police called in for the fire station so they could open the basement floor. Once they arrived, they destroyed the corner of the basement, and sure enough, they found a decomposing human body. It was the body of Claire, the landlord's wife that he had claimed he was going to meet in Portugal. From what the police told my mum, Claire had been sitting underneath that cement since the week we moved in. The worst part was that, from what they could tell, she was buried alive and was still alive for at least 3 days after. Logan never had any intention of coming back to America, so he left us in this house where he made his wife's final resting place. He'd be able to live his life in another country free of any consequence while that poor woman had to suffer. Of course, we didn't stay in that house any longer after that, but what really gets me is the dream I had. Was Claire trying to reach me in my dream state so I could help her find her peace? Did she actually get to rest? Would we have been able to help her if we knew when we first moved in? These are questions I will never have an answer to, but Claire hasn't been in any of my dreams since, and Logan hasn't been heard from in a decade. Strange coincidences after a fairy circle was removed from a cattle field. This story happened in 2007 and gets told every time my family gets together. My nana owns a farm and she's always had a herd of cows and a guard donkey. In one of her cattle fields there used to be a large circle of mushrooms that my nana said was a fairy circle. Now, my nana is Irish, and Irish people don't mess with fairies, and she refused to even mow over the circle. When she married my step-granddad, he didn't believe in fairies or the paranormal, and he wanted to remove the circle from the field, but my nana told him not to. He thought that she was being silly, and they would argue about it all the time. Long story short, he went behind her back and had the fairy circle removed while she was away. When she found out what he did, she refused to talk to him for days and was very angry and upset. 2 weeks after the circle was removed, all of her pregnant cows aborted their calves. My nana was devastated since she is very experienced and careful with looking after her cows, and she has never lost all of her calves before. It hasn't happened since, in fact. She had lost 1 or 2, but never all of them. There was also a strange, scary experience that involved me that my nana believes was also connected. My mum and a 1-year-old me stayed with my nana for a few days to cheer her up, since she was still upset about the calves. Somehow I ended up catching chickenpox, which was supposed to be rare in babies under 1. Luckily, I wasn't too sick, but it still scared everyone. I know that my nana still leaves small offerings in the cattle field, like small cakes and barley water, even though my step-granddad still thinks it's silly. I've stayed at her farm a lot, and the field definitely has a different feel to it that I've never felt anywhere else, especially at night, and I would never stay out after dark. I know it was probably just 2 random coincidences, but it's become a legend in my family. My parents are different. My parents were never religious. They always considered Christianity to be a bunch of people in a dark place wanting something to believe in. Last night they went out to celebrate their anniversary. Usually when they go out, they're back before midnight, but today they got back around lunchtime. I'm happy they had fun, but I don't know what they got up to. It's not my business because they're adults and I'm their kid, but I got a look at my mum's hand and there was a cut on it. It looked fresh. I questioned her on it, but she said that she just had a fall. I don't think a fool could do something that clean, ever. There's something about their eyes that just creep me out. It looks almost glossed over, like they're not there mentally. I keep finding them whispering in corners. When I go up to ask what they're talking about, they just walk away. I don't know whether it's a surprise or something for me, but I don't have a good feeling about it. I had a good relationship with them, but it seems like they want to do something bad to me. As I'm writing this, my dad's making dinner, and my mum keeps murmuring about something higher than God, how it will save us. It's scaring me, man. Maybe she ended up taking something and she's coming down from it. I don't know what to do anymore. If this is a joke, it's going too far. Who is there? It was a usual night for me working the night shift at this house. Mind you, the house is not old in any way. It's a 2-story house that has only one room on the second floor and one downstairs. It was built like 7 years ago and the people living in the house are the original owners. Now, this particular night, it was during a bad rainstorm and the wind was blowing so bad that the trees in the front were bending. And at around 2:30 a.m. I heard the house alarm for the front door. So I got up to take a look. Now, for some reason, this house had one narrow and long hall that was always empty, like no family pictures or decorations except for at the front door at the end of it. The lights of the hallway was off even though I remember it being on an hour ago, and when I tried turning it back on, it would just flicker and then turn off again. I jumped as I felt a strong gust of wind and saw that the front door was completely open. Now, me being me, I thought I must not have shut it completely and the wind must have blown it open. Yeah, that makes sense. So I shut the door and made sure to lock it this time and went back to my chair in the kitchen, not thinking too much of it since it was pretty late and I was getting tired. Around 2:45, I jumped again because I heard what sounded like footsteps upstairs. Now, I knew there was no one up there since my client's bedroom was downstairs. The footsteps I was hearing were heavy and it honestly sounded like someone was knocking over and into things. At first, I thought maybe someone had broken in, so I went upstairs quietly to look around, and when I got to the top of the staircase, I noticed it was freezing. Like, I could see my breath freezing in the air. I looked around, expecting to maybe see a window left open or someone inside, but I didn't see anything. But then I started hearing the footsteps again, and they sounded like they were right behind me. So as I turned around, I saw one bedroom door open, and I saw what looked like a chair sitting in the middle of a room. Now, I've seen enough horror movies to know better and said nope, and just walked really fast back downstairs. After coming back downstairs, I looked at the time and it was 3:30. I thought it was weird because I don't remember being up there for that long, but I brushed it off as me being tired and a little freaked out. So I started to relax again, watching YouTube, when a man with a deep, harsh voice said, "Hey," right in my ear. It startled me so bad that I fell out of the chair, and as I'm looking up from the ground, my heart pounding, I asked, "Hello? Is someone there?" I got up and looked in my client's room thinking maybe they got up, but No, they were sound asleep. I started looking for any explanation for what I heard, but couldn't find any. Nothing. And it sounded like whoever said it was right next to me, but it was just me and my client in the house. I started to feel cold again, and I looked at the thermostat and it said 76, but why did it feel like it was in the 60s? Then the lights started flickering again, and I started panicking, knowing that I just needed to get out of the house. So I ran out into the rain. I wanted to leave, but then I stopped, knowing that I couldn't leave my client alone, so I just stood there in front of the house watching the lights flickering like crazy. I watched for what felt like minutes, and then the lights stopped. They just stopped. I checked my watch and it was 6 a.m. How long have I been standing outside the house, I thought? How long have I been watching the house? I started making my way back inside and everything was normal again. The temperature felt warm, the lights were on, and everything was calm. I started to pack my things up to leave when my client comes out of the room and says, "Good morning, dear." I say morning back and she asked me if I'm okay. I looked at her soaking wet and breathing heavy and said, "Yeah, it was just a long night. Sorry." She smiled at me and walked me to the door, and right as I was leaving, she looked behind her to the stairs and said, "Oh, it looks like he likes you. That's good." I looked behind her and saw no one and asked, "Who told you that?" She just gave me a big smile and said, "See you tomorrow night, dear," and closed the door. I found out later from one of my co-workers who'd worked in the house before that the clients used to have a son who died a few years back. He was very sick and had trouble walking around, and his room was the one upstairs. And one day, when my client was in the back garden working, her son fell down the stairs and died from a cracked skull. My parents are different. Part 2. Something happened last night. I don't know whether it was my fault, but it was scary and I really don't feel safe anymore. I'm trying to figure out a way to leave, but I just can't get away without them watching me. I woke up in the middle of the night to the feeling of someone watching me. Whether it was in the corner of my room or something, I don't know. Not long after my mum came in, she still didn't seem normal, so I don't know what the hell she took. She had something hidden behind her back. The reason for coming in was she heard me scream. I didn't make any noise. Maybe it was a fox outside or something, but I definitely didn't hear it. So I went back to sleep, but I got woken up again by my dad standing over me holding something that was sharpened. I don't know what it was, but I began to cry out in fear. He stopped as soon as he realized, attempting to comfort me. I pushed him off me and out of my room. My door doesn't have a lock on it, but I do have a very heavy dresser which I put in front of my door. There was no way of opening the door from the outside with it. Guess what I woke up to this morning? The dresser halfway across the room and my door wide open. I sat up in bed and looked out of my door. You know when you can tell people are there because you can see their shadows and hear their breathing? I got shot by that feeling. Throughout the day, my parents have been getting weirder and weirder. The cut that was on my mum's hand is gone, but her eyes are still very glossed over. My dad is always really good at cooking, however last night there were maggots in the meat, along with something else. I didn't really get a good look because I got up and left. I know full well that the meat was in date because I bought it 2 days ago. They're still just as secretive. I know it might sound dumb, but I think my parents are trying to kill me. It doesn't feel right. It's like they've been brainwashed. It's driving me insane. I'm currently out of the house with my friend Brian. We're going into the woods. I heard a voice while waking up. I've had a really crappy 2 weeks. My boyfriend broke up with me the same day I had to put my dog down, and I've been really working on getting okay and have been finding the joys in life again. But man, the heartbreak has been the worst I've ever felt. This morning, almost 2 weeks after everything, I'm in the waking up stage and I hear a voice, clear as day, and I remember my thoughts or dreams were still a mosaic, all scattered and not clear. But the voice was very clear, male voice, close to my age, 30s, and it asked, "Are you okay?" in a calm, non-urgent tone. Still half asleep but also realised I'd been asked a question, I paused, thought about the question and responded, maybe out loud, "Yeah, I'm okay." And that was it. I was fully awake. So whoever's looking out for me, I appreciate it. My parents are different. Part 3. He's gone. My friend Brian disappeared. I don't know where the hell he went, but after this guy took us in, we had a few drinks, he just left. My friend and I went into the woods because my parents were still so weird. Brian bought some beer with him, so after we found a spot in the woods, we sat down and had a good time. About sundown, a homeless looking man comes over. He smelled like something dead was left out in the sun. But despite that, and the weird request to sit with us strangers in the wood, we let him. He had a gruff voice. It was hard to make out what he was saying when he spoke. I looked at his hand and it had the same cut as my mum's once had. Not only that, but he stared, speaking about how Zalgan will save us from the end because God can't be trusted. I started laughing, mostly out of how sick I was with crazy people and thinking about religion. But he seemed really serious. The guy was about 6 foot tall. I'm about 5'6" for reference. And his hair was so wispy, yet it was so tangled. He got up in front of me, grabbed my arm and met my eyes. He had the exact same glossed over pale eyes as my parents. This was the only time I understood him. He spoke in a voice that was so deep it couldn't be humanly possible ever, and it sent a chill down my spine. "If you don't believe me, I'll be more than happy to show you." I don't know what happened, but Brian agreed, so I felt pressured to as well. He led us through the forest to a little stick house. After, he set a fire, sat us down, and handed us a really fancy chalice. "Drink," he said. I didn't hesitate, and neither did Brian. I'm so sure it was spiked because it felt like we were flying and we could see something higher than God. It seemed so welcoming but so evil. I'm not sure how that could happen, but it was fighting with what I presume was God. It showed villages through all eras going through so much bad stuff like the plague, TB, famine and loads more. Worst of all, it was all caused by God. And this Zalgan fixed it all, but for a price. Sacrifices. They ranged from mutilated animals to bones and even children. I came too, but Brian was still gone. His eyes were sickly white. The homeless guy took my hand and stabbed it. I screamed, but he covered my mouth and spoke in that voice again. "You will join us. Your parents are already here." I looked around. I didn't see them at all. It took all my strength to get up and go home. I couldn't stop looking at my hand, and my thoughts were so jumbled. When I reached my house, my parents weren't in. They still aren't as I'm writing this. I went to the bathroom and cleaned the cut. Then, to my room, I logged onto my PC I searched up this Zalgan or whatever, but nothing came up but a few companies. However, I did find one thing about a group of people who worshipped a being higher than God. It said, during the Dark Ages, a cult was formed. It was said to offer stuff to something higher than God. The offerings were mutilated animals, bones, dead plants, or even their own members. It was an underground organisation for years. They tended to take in drunk people from the street, keep them for a night, and say that they owe them a favour by a blood pact. During their night stay, they were fed information about this ancient organisation. That's all it said. I'm kind of scared. My parents couldn't be part of this. There's no way. There's not even a thing saying they are. I just hope they're not. After all, my parents were never religious people. I'm gonna wait out tonight and see what my parents do. I'll give an update tomorrow or later to see how things go. Thanks once again for listening to these satisfyingly spooky supernatural tales. Remember to comment, like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notified.